The dust cloud on the horizon should have been a warning, but Sarah Whitmore was too tired to care. 3 months of walking beside her oxen, 3 months of prairie sun and bitter nights, and now she could finally see the wooden buildings of Bitter Creek rising from the wilderness like broken teeth. She adjusted her grip on the lead rope, her fingers stiff with cold despite the afternoon heat, and pressed forward. Behind her, the empty wagon creaked, a hollow sound that echoed the emptiness in her chest. She was the only one walking into town that day, the only survivor of the Henderson wagon train for the 3rd time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's boots scraped against the hard-packed earth of Bitter Creek's main street. The town wasn't much. A collection of weathered buildings huddled against the endless prairie, their facades gray with age and neglect. But after weeks alone on the trail, it looked like salvation. She'd eaten her last piece of hardtack 2 days ago, and the letter in her pocket promised work at the Dusty Boot Inn, a chance to start over, to leave the whispers behind. The first person to notice her was a child, a boy no more than 8, playing with a wooden hoop near the water trough. He took one look at her dust-covered dress, at the strange symbols carved into her wagon's sides, and ran screaming toward the general store. "Ma, Ma, the cursed woman's here, the one from the stories." Sarah's heart sank. Even here, hundreds of miles from Independence, her reputation had arrived first. By the time she reached the inn, a small crowd had gathered. Women clutched there, children close, men stepped back as if she carried plague. She heard the whispers starting, saw fingers pointing at the scars on her hands, at the peculiar way her hair had turned white at the temples despite her 27 years. "That's her," someone muttered. 3 wagon trains, 47 dead. She's the only one who lived. "Ain't natural," another voice added. "Devil's work, mark my words." Sarah kept her head high as she climbed the steps to the Dusty Boot Inn. The letter from Mr. Harrison had been clear: room and board in exchange for kitchen work. She'd written him honestly about her situation, about the attacks, about needing somewhere to begin again. He'd responded with sympathy and an offer. Now, she stood at his door, knuckles white as she knocked. The door opened to reveal a heavy-set man with nervous eyes. Mr. Harrison looked past her at the gathering crowd, then back at her face. His expression shifted from anticipation to something like fear. "Miss Whitmore." His voice cracked on her. "Name?" "Mrs. Whitmore," she corrected gently. "I'm here about the position. Your letter said that was before." He stepped back, hand tightening on the door handle. "Before I knew the whole truth. 3 attacks, they say. Apache, bandits, and something worse. Every soul dead except you." "Mr. Harrison, please, I can explain." "No." The word came out sharp, final. "I've got paying customers to think about. Can't have them spooked by whatever you bring. With you, find somewhere else." The door slammed with a finality that echoed through Sarah's bones. She stood there, letter still clutched in her hand, while the crowd behind her grew. Someone laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. A clod of dirt hit her wagon wheel. She turned to face them, these strangers who'd already decided her fate. "I need work," she said simply. "I can cook, clean, sew. I just need a chance." Silence answered her. Then Reverend Cole stepped forward, his black coat dusty from the street. He was a thin man with eyes like flint, the kind who found sin in sunshine and devil's work in children's laughter. "The Lord marks the wicked," he intoned, voice carrying across the square. 3 times death passed you by. 3 times the innocent fell while you stood. We know the stories. The Henderson party at Owl's Hollow, 20 dead, arrows in there. Backs, wagons burned. The Mitchell train at Serpent Pass, 15 souls taken by bandits, everything stolen. And the Carson group at Thunder Valley. He paused dramatically. 12 people vanished without a trace, except you. Sarah felt her legs trembling but forced herself to stay upright. I didn't ask to survive. I didn't want... Perhaps that's the problem, the Reverend continued. Perhaps you didn't ask. Perhaps something else ensured your survival. Something that demands payment in innocent blood. The crowd murmured agreement. Sarah saw hands moving toward weapons, saw mothers pulling children back. Fear had a smell, she'd learned, like copper and sweat, and it hung thick in the air around her. Please, she tried again, I just need work. I'll stay outside town if that's what you want. A stone struck her shoulder, small but sharp. She stumbled, catching herself against the wagon. When she looked up, she saw them all stepping back, creating distance between themselves and whatever curse they believed she carried. Get out, someone called. Take your devil's luck elsewhere. We don't need your kind here. Cursed woman, marked by evil. Sarah gathered the lead rope with shaking hands. The oxen, sensing distress, lowed nervously as she turned them around. She walked back the way she'd come, through the gauntlet of stairs and whispers, past the church where bells would never ring for her, past the shops where she'd never be welcome. At the edge of town, she found what she was looking for. An abandoned stable, its roof half collapsed, its walls leaning drunkenly against each other. No one would bother her here. No one would come close enough to throw stones or accusations. She unhitched the oxen and led them to the broken water trough, filling it from her own dwindling supply. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions while her mind reeled. 3 months of travel, 3 months of hope ended with the same rejection she'd faced in every town since Thunder Valley. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the prairie gold and crimson, Sarah finally allowed herself to collapse. Against a hay bale. The tears came then, hot and bitter. She'd cried for Thomas after the first attack, cried for the friends lost at Serpent Pass, cried until she thought she had no tears left. But apparently, the well of human sorrow ran deeper than she'd imagined. She didn't notice the figure watching from the ridge above town, didn't see how he stood perfectly still, like part of the landscape itself, his dark eyes tracking her movements with something that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't judgment either. Standing, Elk had been watching since she'd entered the valley, had seen the symbols on her wagon, had noticed things the townspeople missed in their fear. The medicine man remained on his ridge as darkness fell. As Sarah wrapped herself in a moth-eaten horse blanket and tried to find warmth in the drafty stable, he stayed even when clouds rolled in, bringing the smell of rain and the promise of a cold night. He'd seen enough to know what others couldn't, that sometimes the spirits marked people not for evil, but for purposes beyond human understanding. In the stable, Sarah pulled out the last piece of bread from her supplies, hard as stone now, but still food. She gnawed at it slowly, making it last, while wind whistled through the gaps in the walls. Tomorrow she'd have to decide. Try another town, risk another rejection, or... She pushed the thought away. She'd survived 3 massacres. She could survive 1 more night. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall through the broken roof. Sarah pulled the blanket tighter and closed her eyes, trying not to think about the warm beds in the inn, about the kitchen she might have worked in, about the life she might have built. On the ridge, standing Elk finally moved. He'd seen what he needed to see. Tomorrow, perhaps, he would go down to the broken stable. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tomorrow, perhaps, he would speak to the woman the spirits had marked, but tonight he would prepare. There were ceremonies to observe, medicines to gather. The spirits had their reasons, and it wasn't his place to rush their revelation. Sarah shifted in the hay, trying to find a position where the rain didn't drip directly on her face. Her stomach cramped with hunger, and her bones ached from the cold. But she was alive. After everything, after Thomas's death at Owl's Hollow, after the screams at Serpent Pass, after the inexplicable emptiness at Thunder Valley, she was still alive. Whether that was a blessing or a curse, she no longer knew. The town below settled into sleep, doors barred against the night, and whatever evil the townsfolk believed she'd brought with her. Oil lamps flickered out one by one until darkness claimed. The valley, only the saloon stayed lit, voices drifting up on the wind, men discussing the strange woman, theorizing about her curse, making plans to ensure she moved on come morning. Sarah heard none of it. Exhaustion finally claimed her, pulling her into restless dreams where wagon wheels turned endlessly and faces she'd loved called out warnings she couldn't quite hear. In her sleep, she clutched the small leather pouch at her throat. The one thing she'd saved from Thomas's belongings, the one thing she couldn't explain. Inside the pouch, something that looked like an ordinary river stone pulsed with warmth she couldn't feel through her dreams. But standing elk, watching from the ridge, saw the faint glow seeping through the leather. He saw, and he understood, what the townspeople couldn't. The spirits had marked her, yes, but not for the reasons anyone suspected. As rain drummed harder on the stable roof and Sarah shivered in her sleep, the first threads of a larger pattern began to weave themselves. Together, 3 attacks, 3 survivals. 3 times the spirits had intervened, and now, in this forgotten corner of the frontier, the reason would finally be revealed. But that revelation would wait for morning. For now, there was only the rain, the cold, and the lonely sound of wind through broken boards, a lullaby for the woman everyone called cursed, sleeping in hay that smelled of abandonment and fear. In the darkness, something howled. Wolf or wind, it was hard to tell. Sarah stirred but didn't wake. On the ridge, standing elk pulled his buffalo robe closer and continued his vigil. Below in the town, prayers were whispered behind locked doors. Protection sought against the evil that had walked into Bitter Creek on dusty boots and desperate hope. None of them understood, not yet. But understanding would come, as it always did, with the rising sun and the courage to look beyond fear into truth. The night was long and cold in Bitter Creek, and morning felt very far away. Sarah woke to the sound of voices outside the stable. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, leaving everything damp and cold. Through gaps in the walls, pale morning light filtered in, illuminating dust motes that danced in the stale air. Her body ached from sleeping on wet hay, and her stomach twisted with a hunger that had become her constant companion. The voices grew louder, men's voices, hard with determination. She's got to be in there. Where else would she go? Should have run her out last night. Reverend Cole says every hour she stays brings the curse closer. Sarah struggled to her feet, the horse blanket falling away. Her dress was still damp from where rain had leaked through the roof, and her hands shook as she tried to smooth her tangled hair. The oxen stood placidly in their corner, seemingly unconcerned by the gathering crowd outside. The stable door crashed open. Sheriff Wells stood there, flanked by 2 deputies, with what looked like half the town gathered behind them. The sheriff was a broad man with graying whiskers and tired eyes, the kind of lawman who preferred quiet days and simple problems. Sarah Whitmore was neither. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, not unkindly but with no warmth either. "Time to move along." Sarah straightened her spine. "I haven't broken any laws." "Maybe not, but you're disturbing the peace just by being here. Folks are scared, can't have that." Behind him, she could see familiar faces from yesterday. The Reverend with his condemning eyes, Mrs. Patterson clutching her shawl, the saloon, owner Marcus Brady. They all watched her like she might suddenly transform into something monstrous. "I just need supplies," Sarah said quietly. "Food, water, Then I'll go." The sheriff shook his head. "Stores won't sell to you. Best you just head on out. There's a trading post 50 miles west." 50 miles. With no food, little water, and oxen that were already showing signs of exhaustion. It might as well have been a death sentence. "Please," she tried once more, "just some cornmeal, anything." A woman pushed through the crowd. Emma Sullivan, the seamstress. Sarah had noticed her shop yesterday, had thought perhaps she might find work there. Emma's face was pinched with disapproval, but she carried a small burlap sack. "Here," she said, thrusting it at Sarah. "Bread and dried beans. Now go before you bring more misfortune down on us." Sarah took the sack, feeling its meager weight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," Emma snapped. "I just don't want your death on our conscience. Bad enough you're here at all." The crowd parted as Sarah led her oxen out of the stable. Children peered from behind their mothers. Skirts. Men kept hands near their guns. She walked through them like a ghost, eyes fixed straight ahead, the small sack of provisions clutched against her chest. As she hitched the oxen to her wagon, she heard someone spit. The wet sound landed near her feet, but she didn't look down. Her fingers fumbled with the familiar leather straps, made clumsy by exhaustion and shame. "Them symbols," someone called out, "on the wagon sides. Indian markings. That's how she survived. Made some devil's bargain with the savages." Sarah glanced at the strange carvings that had appeared after Thunder Valley. She didn't remember making them, had woken one morning to find them etched deep into the wood. Spirals and wings and shapes that meant nothing to her but seemed to mean everything to those who saw them. "Get on!" Sheriff Wells commanded. "And, oh, don't come back. We'll be watching the roads." Sarah climbed onto the wagon seat, gathering the reins in her blistered hands. The oxen protested as she urged them forward. They needed rest, needed proper feed. But the crowd was pressing closer, their fear transforming into something uglier. A rock sailed past her head, then another. Soon, the air filled with small stones and clods of dirt. Sarah hunched forward, protecting her face as she guided the wagon away from Bitter Creek. Behind her, she heard cheering, the sound of a town celebrating its deliverance from evil. The last thing she saw as she looked back was a solitary figure standing on the ridge above town. An Indian man in traditional dress, watching her departure with an expression she couldn't read from this distance. Then another stone struck the wagon bed, and she turned away, focusing on the rutted trail ahead. The prairie stretched before her, endless and unforgiving. Grass rippled in waves under the morning sun, creating an ocean of gold and green that might have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifyingly empty. Sarah had learned to fear the open spaces, too much sky, too little shelter, too many places for death to hide. By midday, Bitter Creek had vanished behind the rolling hills. Sarah's throat burned with thirst, but she allowed herself only small sips from her water barrel. The oxen plodded steadily, their heads hanging low. They needed rest, but she didn't dare stop until she was sure no one had followed. The letter had called her cursed, but Sarah knew the truth was both simpler and more complex. She'd survived through luck, through Thomas's sacrifice at Owl's Hollow, through hiding during the attack at Serpent Pass. Thunder Valley, that was different. She still didn't understand what had happened there, why she'd woken to find everyone gone, their belongings untouched, their fires still burning. That was when the dreams had started. Dark wings and ancient voices speaking in languages she didn't recognize but somehow understood. That was when she'd carved the symbols, her hands moving without her mind's direction. That was when the whispers had transformed from lucky to cursed. The sun reached its zenith, beating down mercilessly. Sarah finally stopped the wagon beside a small creek, letting the oxen drink while she refilled her water barrel. She ate a small piece of Emma's bread, forcing herself to chew slowly to make it last. As she sat by the water's edge, she noticed tracks in the mud. Horse tracks, fresh. Her heart raced as she scanned the horizon, but saw nothing. Still, the feeling of being watched crept over her like a cold shadow. She was just climbing back onto the wagon when she heard it, the sound that had haunted her nightmares since Thunder Valley. A high, keening cry that wasn't quite human, but wasn't animal either. The oxen bellowed in terror, fighting against their harnesses. Sarah grabbed the reins, trying to calm them, when she saw the rider approaching. Not from the direction of town, but from the west, riding a paint horse with an easy grace that spoke of lifelong horsemanship. As he drew closer, she recognized him, the Indian who'd watched from the ridge. He stopped 20 feet away, raising one hand in a gesture that might have been greeting or warning. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps 50, with grey threading through his long black hair. His face was weathered but kind, marked with lines that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. "Sarah Whitmore," he said, his voice carrying the soft accent of someone who'd learned English as a second language. "I am Joseph Standing Elk. The spirits told me to wait for you." Sarah's hand inched toward the rifle Thomas had taught her to shoot. "I don't want any trouble." Standing Elk smiled slightly. "No, you have had enough trouble. That is why I have come." "Did the town send you? To make sure I keep moving?" "The town fears what they do not understand. They see death following you and think you bring it. They do not see the truth." "And what truth is that?" The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Standing Elk dismounted, moving with deliberate slowness. "May I approach?" Sarah nodded warily. He walked to her wagon, studying the carved symbols with intense interest. His fingers traced one particular pattern, a spiral that ended in what might have been wings or flames. "Ah," he breathed. "Now I understand. You have been marked by the Thunder Beings." "I don't know what that means." "No, you wouldn't. People have forgotten the old ways, the old powers." He looked up at her, his dark eyes serious. "The attacks on your wagon trains, they were not random. Something hunts you, something that wears the face of men but serves a darker purpose." Sarah's hands tightened on the reins. "That's insane. The first attack was Apache raiders. Everyone said so. Everyone was wrong. Tell me, did you see their faces? Did anyone?" She thought back to that terrible morning at Owl's Hollow. The arrows coming from nowhere, the screams, Thomas pushing her under the wagon. "No," she admitted, "it happened too fast." "And at Serpent Pass, the bandits? They wore masks, bandanas, but they were white men. They spoke English." "Did they take anything?" Sarah fell silent. It was something that had bothered her ever since. The supposed bandits had killed everyone, then left without taking money, supplies, or horses. The only thing missing had been the medicine bundle, she whispered. Thomas's grandmother was Cherokee. She'd given him a small leather pouch when we married, said it would protect us on the journey. Standing Elk nodded grimly. "And Thunder Valley? What happened there?" "I don't know. I went to sleep with everyone around the campfire, woke up alone. They were just gone. No signs of struggle, no tracks leading away, like they'd simply vanished." "Show me what you carry at your throat." Sarah's hand flew to the leather pouch she wore. "How did you know?" "I see its power. May I look?" Reluctantly, Sarah pulled the pouch over her head and handed it down. Standing Elk opened it carefully, revealing what appeared to be an ordinary river stone, smooth and grey. But as he held it up to the light, something shifted in its depths. A flash of blue-white, like lightning captured in stone. "Where did you find this?" "At Thunder Valley. It was sitting where the campfire had been, still warm. I thought maybe someone had dropped it." Standing Elk's expression grew troubled. This is a thunderstone, very sacred, very powerful. It chooses its keeper, and it has chosen you. But such power draws hunters, beings that feed on spiritual energy. You're saying something supernatural is killing people to get to me, to get this stone. Not just the stone. You have been changed by it. The thunder beings have marked you as their own. That is why you survived. They protected you, but at a cost. Sarah climbed down from the wagon, her legs shaky. I don't want this, any of it. I just want a normal life. The spirits rarely ask what we want, but I can help you understand. My cabin is a day's ride from here on Blackwing Ridge. You will be safe there while you learn. Learn what? What you are becoming. What hunts you. How to use the power you've been given. He handed back the pouch. Or you can continue, running, but they will find you again. And next time there may be no one left to mourn. Sarah looked at the endless prairie, then back at Standing Elk. Everything he said sounded like madness, but the alternatives were worse, wandering alone until her supplies ran out, or until whatever had destroyed 3 wagon trains caught up with her again. Why would you help me? Standing Elk remounted his horse. Because the thunder beings command it. Because you are not the first to be chosen, and you will not be the last. And because... He paused, looking toward the western mountains. My wife was marked many years ago. I could not save her. Perhaps I can save you. He turned his horse and began riding west, not looking back to see if she would follow. Sarah stood there for a long moment, the reins loose in her hands, the weight of decision pressing down on her shoulders. The oxen lowed impatiently. Behind her lay civilization that had rejected her, branded her as cursed. Ahead lay the unknown, represented by a Lakota medicine man who spoke of spirits and power and ancient hunts. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. Sarah climbed back onto the wagon seat and turned the oxen west, following the lone rider toward the mountains. As the afternoon wore on, she noticed the symbols on her wagon seemed to glow faintly in the slanted sunlight, and the stone at her throat grew warm against her skin. Whatever she was becoming, whatever hunted her, at least she was no longer alone. And for now, that was enough. The prairie gradually gave way to rougher terrain as they traveled. Stands of pine began to appear, then thicker forests. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of rain and something else, something wild and ancient that made the hair on Sarah's neck stand up. Standing Elk rode ahead, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning her of rough patches in the trail. He didn't speak much, seeming content with silence, but his presence was oddly comforting. At least he didn't look at her with fear or disgust. As the sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Standing Elk raised his hand. We camp here tonight. The ridge is still hours away, and the path becomes dangerous in darkness. They stopped in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. A stream gurgled nearby, and the ground was soft with years of fallen needles. Sarah unhitched the oxen while Standing Elk gathered wood for a fire. "You're not afraid of me," Sarah said as they worked. "Everyone else is. Fear comes from ignorance. I know what you are, so I have no reason to fear. And what am I?" Standing Elk arranged the kindling carefully. "You are a bridge between the world of flesh and the world of spirit. The thunder beings need such bridges when great danger threatens." "What kind of danger?" Instead of answering, Standing Elk held his hand over the wood and spoke a few words in Lakota. The kindling burst into flame without spark or match. Sarah stepped back, startled. "That's impossible." "Many things are possible when the spirits are involved. Your friend Thomas, his grandmother, knew this. That's why she gave him the medicine bundle. She sensed something in him, or perhaps in you." Sarah sat down across from him, the fire warming her face. Tell me about your wife. You said she was marked. Standing Elk's eyes grew distant. Her name was Singing Waters. Beautiful, kind, with a laugh like springtime. The Thunder Beings chose her during her vision quest. For 3 years, she served as their voice, their hands in this world. What happened to her? What happens to all who carry such power? The hunters came. We fought them, my people and I, but we were not prepared. They took her, and with her the sacred knowledge she carried. I'm sorry, as am I. But her sacrifice taught us much. We learned the hunters' weaknesses, their patterns. When the Thunder Beings marked you, I knew they would come again. This time we will be ready. Sarah stared into the flames. I don't understand any of this. Why me? I'm nobody special. The spirits see what we cannot. Perhaps it is your strength. You survived losses that would break others. Perhaps it is your heart. You helped others even as you suffered. Or perhaps it is simply fate. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sharing the simple meal of bread and beans. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the clear mountain air. Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in months. Then the stone at her throat began to pulse with cold light. Standing, Elk was on his feet instantly, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. They have found us, faster than I expected. Sarah stood as well, her heart pounding. What do I do? Stay by the fire. Do not run. It will only excite them. And whatever you see, remember, they feed on fear. From the darkness came that sound again, the high, keening cry that wasn't quite human. But now there were more voices joining it, creating a chorus that seemed to come from all directions at once. Sarah grabbed her rifle, but Standing Elk shook his head. Bullets will not stop them. They are not fully in this world. Shapes moved between the trees, man-shaped but wrong somehow, as if someone had tried to recreate human form from memory and gotten the proportions slightly off. Their eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and their movements were too fluid, too graceful to be natural. One stepped into the firelight. It wore the remnants of cavalry uniform, but the fabric was rotted, hanging in strips. Its face was a mockery of human features, the mouth too wide, the eyes too large, the skin gray as ash. "Give us the stone," it spoke, but its lips didn't match the words. The voice seemed to come from the air itself. "Give us the marked one." Standing Elk stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and the creature. He held up a small bundle, decorated with feathers and beads. "By the ancient treaties, by the blood of the earth, I deny you. She is under my protection." The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your protection means nothing, old man. We have fed well on the power of the chosen. We will feed again." More shapes emerged from the darkness. Sarah counted at least a dozen, all wrong, all hungry. The stone at her throat blazed brighter, and she gasped as power surged through her. Wild, electric, overwhelming. The symbols on her wagon began to glow, casting strange shadows that danced independently of the firelight. The hunters hesitated, drawing back slightly. Standing Elk glanced at her. "The Thunder Beings wake within you. Do not fight it. Let it flow." Sarah didn't understand, but she tried to relax, to stop resisting the energy coursing through her veins. The world suddenly seemed clearer, sharper. She could see the hunters as they truly were, not creatures of flesh, but of shadow and hunger. Parasites that fed on spiritual power. One lunged forward, claws extended. Standing Elk shouted something in Lakota, and a barrier of blue-white light sprang up between them. The hunter struck it and recoiled, shrieking. "They cannot cross sacred boundaries," Standing Elk called to her. "But the protection will not last. You must learn to use what you've been given." Another hunter tested the barrier, then another. Each impact weakened the light. Sarah felt the stone pulling at her, urging her to act, but she didn't know how. Then she remembered Thunder Valley. The morning she'd woken alone, there had been patterns burned into the ground around her, spirals and wings, like the symbols on her wagon. She'd thought she was losing her mind, had scrubbed them away before. Anyone could see. Now she understood. She had created those patterns. The power had protected her, even when she didn't know she possessed it. Sarah closed her eyes and reached for that power again. The stone grew hot against her skin, and she felt something vast and ancient stirring within her. The fury of storms, the patience of mountains, the endless turning of seasons. When she opened her eyes, the world had changed. Lines of force crisscrossed the clearing, connecting earth to sky. The hunters appeared as knots of darkness, disruptions in the natural flow. And she blazed like a small sun. The lead hunter snarled, "You cannot control it, you will burn." "Maybe," Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before, "but you'll burn first." She raised her hand, and lightning split. The sky. The lightning struck with devastating precision, not from the sky, but from Sarah's outstretched fingers. The lead hunter shrieked as blue-white energy engulfed it, its form dissolving like smoke caught in a hurricane. The other creatures scattered, their inhuman cries filling the night air. Sarah staggered, the surge of power leaving her dizzy and drained. Standing, Elk caught her arm, steadying her. "Too much, too fast," he said urgently. "You must learn control, or the power will consume you as surely as it consumes them." The remaining hunters circled warily now, keeping beyond the reach of the flickering barrier. Their eyes glowed brighter, filled with a mixture of hunger and something else, fear, perhaps, or calculation. "She is untrained," one of them hissed. "The power will tear her apart from within." Another laughed, that same sound of breaking glass. "Let her burn herself out. Then we feast on what remains." Sarah felt the truth in their words. The energy coursing through her was like trying to contain a river with her bare hands. Already she could feel it eating at her edges, threatening to unmake her from the inside out. Standing Elk pressed something into her hand, a small leather pouch similar to the one at her throat. "Focus on this. Ground yourself. The thunder speaks through you, but you must remain the vessel, not become the storm." The pouch felt cool against her burning palm. Sarah concentrated on its texture, its weight, using it as an anchor while the power raged within her. Gradually, she felt some measure of control return. "Better," Standing Elk murmured. "Now, we must reach my cabin. The protections there are stronger, older. Can you ride?" Sarah nodded, though her legs trembled. They backed toward the wagon, keeping the fire between them and the circling hunters. The oxen were surprisingly calm, as if the glowing symbols on the wagon sides soothed them. As Sarah climbed onto the seat, one of the hunters made a sudden rush. It burst through the weakened barrier in an explosion of sparks, claws extended. Toward her throat, without thinking, Sarah raised her hand. The symbols on the wagon flared brilliant white, and the creature slammed into an invisible wall inches from her face. The impact sent the hunter tumbling backward. It rose slowly, its form flickering and unstable. Green ichor dripped from wounds that looked like burns. "The wagon," Standing Elk said with wonder. "You've unconsciously warded it. Impressive for one untrained." Sarah didn't feel impressive. She felt terrified and exhausted, and the stone at her throat pulsed with each heartbeat like a second heart. But she gripped the reins with determination. "Which way?" Standing Elk had already mounted his horse. "Follow me. Stay close. They will try to separate us." They plunged into the forest, leaving the firelight behind. The path was barely visible in the darkness, but Standing Elk led with sure knowledge. Behind them, the hunters gave chase, their cries echoing through the trees. Branches whipped at Sarah's face as the wagon jolted over roots and stones. The oxen ran faster than she'd ever seen them move, as if they too understood the danger. The glowing symbols cast an eerie light, creating moving shadows that made it hard to distinguish real threats from imagined ones. A hunter leapt from the trees, landing on the wagon bed. Sarah heard splintering wood and felt the vehicle lurch. She turned to see the creature tearing at her supplies, searching for something. "The stone!" it shrieked. "Give us the stone!" The thunderstone blazed at her throat, and suddenly Sarah understood. They weren't just hunting her, they needed the stone itself. It was more than a marker, more than a source of power. It was something specific, something they desperately wanted. Another hunter dropped onto the wagon from overhanging branches. Sarah let go of the reins with one hand, reaching for her rifle out of instinct. But before she could grab it, the symbols flared again. Both creatures screamed as white fire engulfed them, their forms dissolving into ash that scattered in the wind. But the effort cost her. Sarah felt something warm trickling from her nose, blood. The power was taking its toll on her physical form. "Not much farther," Standing Elk called back. Through the trees ahead, Sarah glimpsed structures. A cabin built into the hillside. Other buildings she couldn't make out in the darkness. But between them and safety stood a line of hunters, dozens of them, their eyes creating a wall of green fire. Standing Elk pulled up short. "Too many. We'll have to—" He never finished the sentence. The ground beneath them erupted as something massive burst from the earth. Not a hunter this time, but something far older and more terrible. It stood 3 times the height of a man, its form shifting and changing like smoke-given substance. Where its face should have been was only darkness pierced by 2 points of burning crimson. "Ancient One," the hunters whispered, falling back in reverence or fear. The massive being spoke, its voice like the grinding of mountains. "The compact is broken. She who bears the Thunderstone must surrender it, or all promises between the worlds become void." Standing Elk's face went pale. "You cannot be here. The treaties forbid—" "Treaties made with mortals who understood their place." The Ancient One's attention fixed on Sarah. "This one changes the balance. She must choose. Surrender the stone, or watch all mortal bonds dissolve." Sarah didn't understand the full implications, but she sensed the weight of the moment. This was about more than just her survival. "What happens if I give it to you?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "The hunt ends. You return to your small life. The power that burns within you fades to memory. And if I refuse?" The Ancient One seemed to smile, though it had no face to smile with. "Then the old wars begin anew. Your kind and the spirit kind, locked in conflict until one or both are destroyed, starting with everyone you have ever cared for." Sarah thought of the wagon trains, of Thomas, of all the innocent people who had died because of her connection to this stone. The weight of their deaths pressed down on her like physical force. Her hand moved toward the pouch at her throat. "No." Standing Elk said sharply, "You don't understand what you'd be giving up. The Thunder Beings chose you for a reason. There's something coming, something worse than hunters or Ancient Ones. Without the stone, without you, we have no defense." The Ancient One laughed, a sound like avalanches. "Listen to him, mortal. Make your choice with full knowledge. The stone is a key, yes, but to what door? And what lies beyond it?" Sarah felt the stone pulsing against her palm, warm and alive. Images flashed through her mind, visions she didn't understand. Cities burning, skies torn open, figures of light battling shadows that dwarfed mountains. And through it all, a presence that whispered in languages older than human speech. She lowered her hand. "I keep it," she said quietly. The Ancient One reared back. "You choose war. I choose to understand before I surrender anything." Sarah met its burning gaze. "You say I must give up the stone or people suffer, but people are already suffering. They've been dying around me for months. If I'm going to be responsible for death either way, I'd rather know why." The silence stretched taut. Then, impossibly, the Ancient One began to laugh. Not the terrible sound from before, but something almost approving. "Wisdom," it rumbled. "Unexpected. Very well," Thunder marked. "Keep your stone, learn its purpose. But know this, the hunt will not end. They will come for you, again and again, until you master what you carry or it destroys you." The massive figure began to sink back into the earth. As it descended, it spoke one last time. "Find the circle of first thunder. There you will understand. But hurry, the devourers wake, and they hunger for more than just power." Then it was gone, leaving only disturbed earth and the smell of ozone. The hunters had vanished too, melted away into the forest shadows. The sudden quiet felt wrong, dangerous. Standing Elk exhaled slowly. "You just did something either very brave or very foolish." "What's the difference?" Sarah asked weakly. "About 50 years of training." He gestured toward the cabin. "Come, we have much to discuss, and the night is far from over." They completed the journey in tense silence. The cabin proved to be larger than it had appeared, built cunningly into the natural rock of the hillside. Other structures clustered nearby, a sweat lodge, storage buildings, what might have been guest quarters. As they approached, Sarah saw symbols carved into posts and lintels, similar to those on her wagon, but far more complex. The air itself felt different here, charged with purpose. Standing Elk helped her down from the wagon. Her legs nearly buckled, the aftermath of channeling so much power leaving her weak as a newborn calf. "Easy," he said. "The first time is always the hardest. Your body must learn to be a conduit rather than a container." Inside, the cabin was warm and surprisingly spacious. Herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with sage and sweetgrass. Shelves lined the walls, packed with books, jars, and objects Sarah couldn't identify. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. Standing Elk guided her to a chair near the fire. "Rest. I'll tend to your animals and prepare something for your nose." Sarah touched her face, surprised to find blood still flowing freely. She hadn't even noticed in the chaos of their escape. While Standing Elk worked outside, she sat stunned, trying to process everything that had happened. The stone at her throat had quieted to a gentle warmth, almost comforting now, but she could still feel the power coiled within her, waiting. Standing, Elk returned with her saddlebags and a wooden cup filled with something that smelled of mint and copper. "Drink, it will help with the bleeding and the pain that comes after." The liquid was bitter but soothing. As she drank, Standing Elk busied himself at the hearth, adding herbs to a small pot. "The Ancient One," Sarah said finally. "What is it?" "Old, older than my people's memory. They exist between worlds, neither fully spirit nor flesh. Once, they walked freely among us. Now they're bound by treaties made in the first days. But it came anyway, because you represent something new. The Thunder Beings haven't chosen a vessel in generations. That you're not of the people, that you came to the power without preparation or ceremony, it changes things." "What did it mean about the Devourers?" Standing Elk's hands stilled. "I had hoped. But no, if the Ancient One speaks of them, then the danger is real. The Devourers are why the Thunder Beings withdrew from the world. They consume everything. Power, spirit, life force. Even the hunters fear them. And they're waking up? So it seems, which explains why the Thunder Beings chose you. They need someone in this world, someone who can act where they cannot." Sarah laughed bitterly. "They picked the wrong person. I can barely control this power without bleeding from my nose." "Control comes with understanding. Understanding comes with acceptance." Standing Elk pulled a leather-bound book from a shelf. Your husband's grandmother, did she ever speak to you about the old ways? No. Thomas said she died when he was young. He barely remembered her. Yet she gave him a medicine bundle specifically for your journey. She knew something, saw something. He opened the book, revealing pages covered in symbols similar to those on her wagon. These are the marks of thunder dreamers, those chosen by the thunder beings. Each tells a story, carries a meaning. Sarah leaned forward, studying the intricate designs. As she looked, some seemed to shift and move like living things. "I can read them," she whispered. "How is that possible?" "The stone teaches. It carries memories, knowledge accumulated over centuries, but accessing that knowledge safely, that's what you must learn." A wolf howled somewhere in the distance, and Standing Elk glanced toward the door. "They're setting watches. The hunters may have withdrawn, but they won't go far. This place is protected, but we should prepare for a siege. I've brought danger to your home. You've brought purpose. I've been waiting, preparing for years without knowing exactly why. Now I understand. The thunder beings knew what was coming. They chose their vessel, and they made sure you would find your way to someone who could help." Sarah touched the stone again. "Why didn't you just tell me all this when we met? Why the mystery? Would you have believed me? Would you have come willingly if I'd announced that you were chosen by ancient powers to fight creatures from beyond the world?" Standing Elk smiled grimly. "Sometimes truth must be experienced, not explained. What happens now? Now you learn. The Ancient One mentioned the Circle of First Thunder. That's a sacred site, hidden in the mountains. But you're not ready for that journey. First, you must understand what you carry, what you're becoming." He pulled another book from the shelf, this one newer looking. "I've spent years collecting stories, testimonies from other thunder dreamers. Most died young, consumed by power they couldn't control. But a few mastered it, became bridges between worlds." "Bridges," Sarah repeated. "You said that before. Bridges for what?" "For knowledge, for power, for communication between the spirit, world and ours, but also for protection. When the barriers weaken, when things like the Devourers threaten both worlds, someone must stand between." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a mountain. "I just wanted to reach Oregon, start a new life with Thomas. Farm, maybe, raise children." "The spirits rarely ask what we want," Standing Elk said gently. "But they never choose someone incapable of the task. You survived 3 attacks that should have killed you. You manifested power without training. You stood before an Ancient One and chose wisdom over fear. You're stronger than you know." Outside, something screamed, not the hunter's keening cry, but something else. Something that sounded almost human. Standing Elk was at the window instantly. "They're testing the boundaries, looking for weakness." Sarah joined him, peering out into the darkness. She could see shapes moving between the trees, some humanoid, others not. There are so many. "Yes, your presence draws them. The stone calls to anything with hunger for power. But that's not necessarily bad. Better to know where your enemies are, and not all who come are enemies. Some seek understanding. Others offer alliance. The spirit world is as complex as our own." As if in response to his words, a figure emerged from the forest edge. Not a hunter, but a woman in white duskin, her face painted with symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. She approached the cabin slowly, hands visible and empty. "That's a spirit talker from the Crow Nation," Standing Elk said with surprise. "I haven't seen one in years." The woman stopped just outside the boundary marked by carved posts. "When she spoke, her voice carried despite the distance. Standing Elk of the Lakota. I bring words from the Council of 7 Fires. The Thunder Dreamer must be brought to the gathering. The signs are clear. The last hunt begins." Standing elks. Face grew grave. How long do we have? 3 moons, perhaps less. The devourers stir in the deep places. Already the animals flee, and the rivers run backward in the high country. The woman's gaze fixed on Sarah. She is not ready. No, Standing Elk agreed, but she will be. The woman nodded once, then faded back into the forest like mist dissolving in morning sun. Sarah sank back into her chair. 3 months to learn what others study for a lifetime? You won't be learning from scratch. The stone carries knowledge. You've already accessed some of it instinctively. We just need to teach you control, understanding, and we won't be alone. If the Council of 7 Fires has called a gathering, others will come to help. The Crow Woman, she wasn't human, was she? Half spirit, probably. Some of us walk between worlds by blood as well as calling. Standing Elk returned to his preparations. You should sleep. Tomorrow we begin your real training. I don't think I can sleep, not after everything. Then I'll make you something to help, but rest you must. The power you channeled tonight, it's like running a marathon without training. Your body needs time to adjust. As he worked, Sarah found herself studying the symbols carved into the cabin's walls. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see they formed patterns, told stories. Here was a tale of thunder and lightning. There, a battle between light and shadow. And in one corner, almost hidden, this one, she said, pointing. It shows the wagon trains, 3 circles, 3 breaks, and a 4th. Standing Elk looked where she pointed. His expression darkened. Yes, the pattern isn't complete. There will be another attack. When? Soon. The hunters grow desperate. They need the stone before you fully awaken to its power. He handed her another cup, this one smelling of chamomile and something earthier. Drink, sleep. Tomorrow you begin to understand why the thunder beings chose you. Sarah accepted the cup, but her eyes remained on the carved symbols. 4 circles, 3 broken. If the pattern held, more people would die because of her. Unless she learned to control the power that burned within her. Unless she understood what the thunder beings truly wanted. As drowsiness finally began to claim her, one last thought flickered through her mind. What if the cost of saving everyone was becoming something no longer entirely human? The stone pulsed once against her throat, warm and reassuring, or warning. In the forest outside, the watchers maintained their vigil. Ancient powers stirred in the deep places of the world. And in a cabin protected by symbols older than memory, Sarah Whitmore began her transformation from survivor to savior, or destroyer. The choice, ultimately, would be hers. But first, she had to learn what she was choosing between. Dawn came, too soon, bringing with it the weight of new knowledge. Sarah woke to find Standing Elk already at work, grinding herbs in a stone bowl. Her body ached as though she'd been beaten, every muscle protesting as she sat up from the pile of furs where she'd collapsed the night before. Good, you're stronger than you appear, Standing Elk said without turning. Most who channel that. Much power sleep for days afterward. Sarah pressed her palms against her temples, trying to ease the thundering in her skull. I feel like I've been trampled by wild horses. Close enough. Raw power is like an unbroken stallion. It will throw you, kick you, leave you broken if you don't learn to ride properly. He brought her a cup of dark liquid that smelled of bark and bitter roots. This will help. The brew was vile but effective. Within moments, the pounding in her head subsided to a manageable ache. Sarah stood carefully, testing her balance. Today, we begin with understanding. Standing Elk gestured to a cleared space in the center of the cabin where symbols had been drawn in what looked like sand, mixed with something that glittered. Sit. Close your eyes. Feel the stone. Sarah lowered herself to the floor, crossing her legs as she'd seen him do. The thunderstone hung warm against her chest, pulsing gently with her heartbeat. The stone is not just a source of power, Standing Elk began, settling across from her. It's a bridge, a key, a memory keeper. Within it lies the essence of every thunder dreamer who carried it before you. Their knowledge, their experiences, their mistakes, all preserved. How many have there been? 7, including you. The first was Morning Star, a Cheyenne warrior who found the stone when the world was young. He used it to drive back the first incursion of devourers. The last before you was Singing Waters, my wife. Sarah opened her eyes. Tell me about her. Really, tell me. Standing Elk's weathered face softened with memory. She was 17 when the Thunder Beings chose her. Just a girl, but with spirit enough for 10 warriors. I was young and proud, thought I could protect her from any danger. His voice grew heavy. I was wrong. The hunters? No, something worse. She discovered that the stone was part of a larger pattern. 7 stones, 7 guardians, scattered across the world. She tried to find the others, to unite them before. The Devourers fully awakened, but someone betrayed her location. Human agents of the shadow, men who'd sold their souls for promises of power. Sarah felt the stone pulse with what might have been sorrow. They killed her. Worse, they trapped her between worlds, neither dead nor alive. I've spent 20 years searching for a way to free her, studying, preparing. When the stone appeared, again, I knew the Thunder Beings had chosen someone new, someone who might succeed where she failed. No pressure, Sarah said weakly. Standing Elk almost smiled. The spirits choose capable vessels. Now, back to your lesson. Touch the stone. Let it speak. Sarah wrapped her fingers around the warm surface. Immediately, the world shifted. She was no longer in the cabin, but standing on a vast plain under a storm-dark sky. Lightning wrote patterns across the clouds, and she understood them like written words. The first lesson, power flows like water. It cannot be grasped, only guided. She was back in the cabin, gasping. I saw the teaching ground. Good. You're more receptive than I expected. Again. For hours they worked. Sarah learned to slip between vision and reality, to read the lightning language, to feel the currents of power that flowed through all living things. By midday, she could hold a handful of summer lightning without burning, could speak the first words of thunder speech. But with each lesson came warnings. She saw what happened to thunder dreamers who overreached. Bodies turned to glass, minds shattered by visions, souls scattered across multiple worlds. The power was seductive, whispering promises of godhood. That's the real danger, Standing Elk explained during a brief rest. Not the hunters or even the devourers. The temptation to become something beyond human, to forget why you were chosen. As afternoon deepened, visitors began arriving. First came the Crow spirit talker from the night before, accompanied by an elderly Apache medicine man. Then others, a young Shoshone woman marked with similar thunder scars, a Mexican priest who spoke of visions, even a Chinese railroad worker who carried prayer beads that hummed with contained power. Allies, Standing Elk explained, drawn by the awakening. Each brings knowledge, perspective. You'll need them all. The gathering filled the cabin and spilled into the clearing outside. Sarah found herself at the center of a circle of power unlike anything she'd imagined. Each person shared their piece of the puzzle, ancient prophecies, half-remembered legends, fragments of truth preserved across cultures. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The Devourers aren't from our reality, the Apache elder explained, his voice dry as desert wind. They exist in the spaces between worlds, in the void between heartbeats. When the barriers weaken, they push through, consuming everything, matter, energy, souls. The Chinese man, who introduced himself as Chen Wei, added, "In my homeland, we call them the hungry ghosts of the void. Our oldest texts speak of a time when 7 lights stood against the darkness, 7 stones, 7 guardians, But only one stone remains active, the Mexican priest interjected. The others sleep, their guardians long dead or lost. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility crushing down. You're saying I need to find 6 other stones and somehow awaken them before these devourers break through? Not just find them, the Crow Woman corrected. You must survive long enough to master your own stone, locate the others, find worthy bearers for each, and unite them all before the convergence. When is this convergence? Standing Elk consulted a calendar marked with symbols. The signs suggest 3 months, perhaps less if the hunters manage to weaken the barriers further. 3 months to do the impossible. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. And if I fail, then both worlds fall into eternal hunger, Chen Wei said simply. Your world, the spirit world, and every reality connected to them. The devourers consume until nothing remains but void. That night, as the gathering settled into deep discussion, Sarah stepped outside for air. The forest was quiet, but not peacefully so. It was the silence of held breath, of waiting catastrophe. She found herself at the edge of the warded boundary, staring into the darkness. The thunderstone pulsed with steady warmth, and she could feel the power flowing through her more naturally now. Standing Elk's teaching had given her basic control, but she was far from mastery. A movement in the shadows caught her eye. Not a hunter, she would have sensed their wrongness. This was something else. "Show yourself!" she called, letting power color her voice. A figure stepped from behind a pine tree. A woman, but like the crow spirit talker, not entirely human. Her features shifted subtly, as if she existed in multiple realities simultaneously. "Sister," the apparition said, and Sarah knew that voice. "Singing waters?" A sad smile crossed the spirit's face. "What remains of me? I exist between worlds. Now trapped by betrayal but not destroyed, I've been waiting. Standing Elk searches for you. He's never given up hope. I know. His love anchors me, keeps me from dissolving entirely, but I didn't come to speak of myself. You need to understand what he won't tell you." Sarah stepped closer to the barrier. "What do you mean?" "The full truth about the Thunder Dreamers, about what you're becoming." Singing Waters raised a translucent hand. "We aren't just bridges between worlds. We become part of both worlds. The more power you channel, the less human you remain. Eventually, you'll have to choose. Keep your humanity and fail in your mission, or sacrifice it to save everything. There must be another way." "Perhaps." "I thought so too. But the stone changes you at a fundamental level. Already your blood carries lightning. Your bones resonate with thunder. Soon you'll see through time, speak with mountains, dance with storms. How long before Sarah Whitmore is just a memory and something else wears your face?" Sarah touched the stone, feeling its steady pulse. "Is that what happened to you?" "Partially. I was transforming when they trapped me. Now I'm neither human nor spirit, neither alive nor dead. A warning, perhaps, of what happens when the change is interrupted." "How do I avoid your fate?" "Trust carefully. The betrayer was someone I loved, someone I thought incapable of treachery. They used my trust to find the weak point in my defenses." Singing Waters began to fade. "And remember, the Thunder beings serve their own purposes. They chose you not for your sake, but for theirs. When the time comes, you may have to choose between what they want and what's right." "Wait!" Sarah called, but the spirit had vanished. Like smoke in moonlight, she stood alone at the boundary, processing this new knowledge. The stone at her throat felt heavier now, its warmth less comforting. Was she saving the world or losing herself? Could she do one without the other? A hand touched her shoulder, and she nearly jumped. Standing Elk stood beside her, his expression unreadable. "You saw her," he said. It wasn't a question. She warned me about the transformation, about trust. Standing Elk was quiet for a long moment. I should have told you, but I hoped. I wanted to believe there was a way to master the power without losing yourself. Is there? I don't know. The old texts speak of one who walked both paths, who found balance between human and spirit, but the texts are incomplete, and that Thunder Dreamer's name is lost to time. They walked back toward the cabin together. Inside, the gathering had produced maps and artifacts, planning the search for the remaining stones. We've identified probable locations for 3 stones, the Apache elder announced as they entered. One sleeps beneath the ruins of an Aztec temple. Another lies in a cave system in the Black Hills. The third, he hesitated. The third is in the possession of the railroad baron, Marcus Worthington. Sarah recognized the name. Worthington was infamous back east, a man who'd built his fortune on others' misery, who was rumored to dabble in the occult. He knows what he has, she asked. Worse, Chenwei answered. Our sources say he's trying to corrupt it, to use it as a focus. For dark rituals, he seeks to bargain with the devourers, offering our world in exchange for personal power. The Mexican priest crossed himself. Madness. He would destroy everything for temporal gain. Then we stop him, Sarah said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. We recover the stone and find someone worthy to bear it. It won't be simple, Standing Elk warned. Worthington has wealth, influence, and human agents. Plus, he's built defenses against spiritual attack. You'd have to face him in the physical world, where your powers are limited. Then I'll learn to fight in both worlds. Sarah met each person's gaze in turn. You've all risked everything to be here, to share your knowledge. Now I need your help. Teach me, train me, help me become what's necessary to stop the devourers. The Shoshone woman stepped forward. I'll teach you to read the wind, to find what's hidden. I know the ways of walking unseen, Chenwei offered, useful for infiltration. One by one, they pledged their knowledge. Sarah felt something shift inside her, not the thunder power, but something deeper, purpose, determination, and perhaps the first stirring of wisdom. The next weeks blurred together, days filled with training, physical, mental, spiritual, nights spent in visions, learning from the memories stored in the stone. Sarah's body changed, becoming stronger, faster. Her senses sharpened until she could hear conversations a mile away, see the spirit forms that overlaid the physical world. But with each advancement came Singing Water's warning. She felt her humanity stretching, thinning. Sometimes she forgot to eat until Standing Elk reminded her. Sleep became optional. Her reflection in still water showed eyes that sparked with inner lightning. Letters arrived from scouts. Worthington was fortifying his compound in Colorado. The hunters massed in the mountains, preparing for a final assault. And from the deep places came reports of strange happenings, animals fleeing, plants withering, reality itself becoming unstable. The barriers weakened faster than predicted, Standing Elk observed one morning, studying the signs. We have perhaps 6 weeks before the first devourers break through. Sarah stood from her meditation, power crackling around her like an aurora. Then it's time I go after Worthington's stone first. If he's trying to corrupt it, every day we wait increases the danger. You're not ready. I'll never be ready enough, but I'm more prepared than I was yesterday, and tomorrow might be too late. She touched the thunderstone, feeling its agreement. Besides, I won't go alone. The plan they developed was ambitious. A small team would approach Worthington's compound. Sarah, Chenwei for his stealth skills, and the Mexican priest, Father Miguel, who knew the country. Meanwhile, the others would prepare defenses at 3 sacred sites, creating strongholds for the final battle. The night before departure, Standing Elk gave Sarah a gift, a war shirt decorated with thunder symbols, made from hide that seemed to shift between realities. "It won't stop bullets," he warned, "but it will help you maintain your sense of self when the power threatens to overwhelm." Sarah held the shirt, feeling its weight. "If I don't come back, you will." The thunder beings didn't choose you to fail at the first real test. "And if I succeed but lose myself in the process?" Standing Elk's eyes were sad but resolved. "Then I'll do what must be done, as I should have done for Singing Waters." They didn't speak of it again, but the promise hung between them. If Sarah fell to corruption or transformation, Standing Elk would end her journey before she became a threat. The morning of departure came grey and cold. Sarah mounted a horse they'd acquired, her companions likewise mounted. The Thunderstone hung beneath her shirt, warm against her skin. Her rifle was loaded with special ammunition, bullets inscribed with binding runes. At her waist hung a knife Chen Wei had blessed with Eastern ceremonies. As they rode out, the gathered allies performed their own rituals. Smoke rose from sacred fires. Chants in a dozen languages followed them down the mountain trail. Sarah felt the weight of their hopes, their fears, their desperate faith that she could do what needed to be done. 3 days hard riding brought them to the edges of Worthington's domain. The land itself felt wrong here, twisted by whatever rituals the railroad baron performed. Trees grew in unnatural spirals. Water ran uphill. The very air tasted of copper and ash. "He's already begun," Father Miguel observed, clutching his cross. "This corruption spreads like a disease." They made camp in a protected hollow, and Sarah sent her consciousness ahead, riding the wind as the Shoshone woman had taught her. What she saw chilled her to the bone. Worthington's compound was a fortress of iron and stone, surrounded by armed men. But the human guards were the least of the defenses. Shadow forms patrolled the walls, hunters bound to Worthington's will. And at the center, in a tower that reached towards storm-dark clouds, something pulsed with sick light, the corrupted stone. She returned to her body gasping. "He's further along than we thought. The stone! It's already partially turned. If he completes the ritual." "Then we have a deadline," Chen Wei said grimly. "Tomorrow night is the new moon. Optimal conditions for dark workings. He'll make his final push then." They had 1 day to infiltrate a fortress, bypass an army of guards and bound spirits, and somehow restore a corrupted Thunderstone before its power could be turned to opening a door for the Devourers. Sarah touched her own stone, drawing comfort from its steady warmth. "Then we move tonight, before he expects us." As the sun set, they prepared. Chen Wei produced packets of herbs that would mask their presence from spirit sight. Father Miguel blessed their weapons with holy water and sacred salt. Sarah centered herself, finding the balance between human determination and thunder power. The approach was tense. They moved through corrupted forest, avoiding patrols, guided by skills, both mundane and mystical. The compound's walls loomed before them, iron plates inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Chen Wei found their entrance, a drainage grate that led to the compound's lower levels. They crawled through darkness that felt alive, with malevolent purpose, emerging in a basement storage area. "The tower," Sarah whispered. "Everything centers there." They climbed through the compound's levels, Chen Wei's training keeping them hidden from human guards. But as they rose higher, the spiritual defenses grew stronger. Bound hunters drifted through walls, searching. Reality itself seemed to twist. Corridors becoming mazes, distances stretching impossibly. Father Miguel's prayers helped, creating pockets of stability. Chen Wei's charms confused the seeking spirits, and Sarah finally understood what the training had been for. She walked between worlds now, seeing the truth behind illusions, finding the real path through false turnings. They reached the tower's base as midnight approached. Above them, storm clouds gathered, not natural weather but manifestation of the ritual building to climax. Through stone walls, Sarah felt the corrupted stone's pulse, sick and wrong. The final guardian waited at the tower's entrance, not a hunter, but something worse, a man who'd sold his humanity for power. His eyes were voids, his smile a wound. In reality, the Thunder Dreamer, he said, voice like grinding stone. Worthington predicted you'd come. He's prepared a special welcome. The man-thing attacked, moving with inhuman speed. Sarah met him with lightning reflexes of her own, the war shirt flaring with protective light. They fought through multiple realities simultaneously, trading blows in the physical world while their spirits clashed in spaces between. Her companions tried to help, but this battle was beyond them. They could only watch as Sarah and the Guardian tore at each other with forces that warped the air around them. Finally, Sarah found her opening, not through power but through compassion. She saw the man this creature had been, saw the moment of his fall, the fear that had driven him to bargain away his soul. "I forgive you," she said, meaning it. The Guardian froze, confusion replacing certainty. In that moment, Sarah struck, not with lightning or force, but with the pure energy of the Thunderstone. The creature's form unraveled, the man within freed at last to find whatever peace awaited him. But the battle had cost time. Above them, the ritual reached its crescendo. Sarah ran up the tower stairs, taking them three at a time. Behind her, Chenwei and Father Miguel fought to keep pursuing guards at bay. She burst through the final door alone. Marcus Worthington stood at the room's center, arms raised, chanting in a language that predated human speech. Before him, on an altar of black stone, lay the corrupted Thunderstone. It pulsed with darkness, its surface cracked, leaking shadows that ate at the light. Worthington turned, his face gaunt with expended power. "Too late, woman. The door opens. The Devourers come, and I shall be their favored servant in the new order." Sarah felt the truth of his words. Reality was tearing. Through widening rifts, she glimpsed the void beyond, and the hungry things that waited there. The Devourers, living emptiness, conscious hunger, entropy given form and purpose. But she smiled. "You made one mistake," she said, pulling her own Thunderstone free. Worthington laughed. "And what's that? You think the stones are just tools, but they're more. They're alive. They remember." She held her stone high, and this one remembers its brother. The corrupted stone pulsed, its darkness wavering. Sarah poured her power through her stone, not attacking, but calling, reminding, offering redemption. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the corrupted stone began to sing, a broken, mournful sound that built toward harmony. "No!" Worthington screamed, trying to complete his ritual. But it was already too late. The corrupted stone remembered its purpose, its true nature. The darkness cracked away like a shell, revealing thunderlight beneath. The opening rifts began to seal. Worthington, in desperation, reached for powers not meant for mortal handling. Sarah watched in horror as his body began to transform, merging with the shadows he'd courted. She had a choice: stop him or save the stone. She chose the stone. As Worthington became something monstrous, Sarah grabbed the newly cleansed thunder stone. Power blazed through her, too much, too fast. She felt her humanity stretching to the breaking point. This was the moment Singing Waters had warned about, the choice between remaining human and claiming the power needed to save everything. In that moment of crisis, she found a third option. Instead of rejecting her humanity or surrendering to transformation, she embraced both. Let the thunder power change her, yes, but guided by human will, human compassion, human love for the world she protected. The transformation was agony and ecstasy combined. She became living lightning, thought moving at light speed, awareness expanding to encompass the entire compound, the surrounding lands, the spiritual realms beyond. But at her core, she remained Sarah Whitmore, widow, survivor, protector. Worthington, now a creature of pure shadow and hunger, lunged at her. She met him with twin thunderstones blazing, and their clash shook the tower to its foundations. In the end, it wasn't even a contest. Worthington had sought power for himself. Sarah channeled it for others. The difference was everything. The shadow thing that had been Worthington dissolved, its essence scattered to the void. The tower began to collapse, reality reasserting itself as the corrupt ritual failed. Sarah grabbed the cleansed stone and ran, her transformed body moving with impossible grace. She found Chen Wei and Father Miguel at the tower's base, gathered them in arms. Now more energy than flesh, and leaped. They landed outside the compound as it imploded, Worthington's accumulated darkness consuming itself. Guards fled in terror. Bound spirits, freed from their slavery, dissipated into the night. As dawn broke, Sarah stood with her companions, two thunderstones pulsing in harmony. She was changed. Her eyes held lightning, her hair was shot through with white, and power hummed beneath her skin. But she was still herself. "One down," she said, her voice carrying new harmonics. "5 to go." Father Miguel crossed himself. "Madre de Dios, what have you become?" Sarah smiled, and there was both humanity and divinity in it. "What I need to be." The journey back to Standing Elk's cabin took half the time it should have. Sarah existed partially outside normal space now, able to fold distances when needed. Her companions traveled in her wake, protected by her expanded awareness. They arrived to find the gathering in full preparation for war. Scouts reported that the hunters massed for a final assault. The remaining thunderstones had been located, or at least their probable positions identified. And the barriers between worlds grew thinner by the hour. Standing Elk took one look at Sarah and nodded slowly. "So, you found the balance?" "Barely. And I'll need help maintaining it. The power wants to consume me completely. Only by conscious choice do I remain me. That's more than most achieve. And the stone." Sarah produced the second thunderstone. It pulsed with clean light, eager to be united with its siblings, cleansed, ready for a new bearer. The Apache elder stepped forward. "I know someone, my granddaughter. She has the calling but refused it, fearing the burden. Perhaps now." Plans within plans. They had 5 weeks at most. 5 stones. To find or cleanse. Bearers to choose and train. And all while the hunters prepared their own assault. Sarah stood at the center of it all. 2 stones pulsing against her chest, power flowing through her like a river. She was the bridge now. Truly, between human and spirit, earth and thunder, mortal and divine. The war for 2 worlds was about to begin in earnest, and she would lead it, not as the scared widow who'd stumbled into Bitter Creek months ago, but as something new, something necessary, something balanced between the thunder's call and the human heart that refused to surrender its compassion. The Thunder Dreamer had awakened. Now came the harder task, saving everything she'd sworn to protect, without losing the self that made the protection meaningful. Standing Elk placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ready?" Sarah nodded, feeling the weight and wonder of her transformation. "Let them come. We'll be waiting." As storm clouds gathered on the horizon, pregnant with more than rain, Sarah Whitmore stood with her allies and prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of all realities. Human and spirit, mortal and eternal. She was the bridge between worlds, and bridges, she had learned, were built to bear weight. The thunderstones sang in harmony and the real work began. The world trembled on the knife's edge of apocalypse. 2 weeks had passed since the recovery of the corrupted. Stone and the signs of approaching catastrophe multiplied daily. Rivers flowed backward in the high country. Animals fled southward in great migrations, predator and prey running side by side. The aurora borealis blazed even in daylight, painting the sky in unnatural colors. Sarah stood on the ridgeline above, Standing Elk's cabin, her transformed senses reaching across vast distances. She could feel the other thunderstones now, 2 recovered by Allied teams, 2 still lost, and 1 in the possession of something that might once have been human. The Apache elder's granddaughter, Mourning Dove, had accepted her stone after witnessing the refugees fleeing from the north. A Buddhist monk from the California coast bore another, his lifetime of meditation preparing him for the burden. 5 bearers found, 2 stones missing, and time running out like sand through a shattered hourglass. "They're moving," she said, as Standing Elk joined her. "The hunters mass at Devil's Canyon, thousands of them. They know we're close to uniting the stones. Desperation makes them bold." Standing Elk studied the darkening northern horizon. The barriers won't hold much longer. Sarah touched the 2 stones at her throat, her original and Worthington's cleansed stone. They pulsed in harmony, their combined power allowing her to maintain the delicate balance between human consciousness and thunderborn divinity. "We need those last 2 stones, without the full circle. I know. The scouts report one lies beneath the waters of Crater Lake. The other..." Standing Elk hesitated. "The other travels with the hunter army. Their leader carries it." Sarah turned sharply. "What kind of leader?" "Something that calls itself the first betrayer, the original human who bargained with the devourers eons ago. It's been waiting, planning, preparing for this moment when the barriers weaken enough for a full incursion." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wrongness, that mixture of copper and ash that marked places where reality had been wounded. Sarah closed her eyes, extending her awareness northward. Through spirit sight, she saw the hunter army, a writhing, massive shadows and corrupted forms, centered around something that blazed with inverted light. The stolen thunderstone, twisted to serve entropy instead of creation. "I'll have to face it," she said quietly. "The first betrayer. It's the only way to recover that stone. Not alone. The other bearers are still learning control. They've had their stones for days, not months, and someone needs to retrieve the Crater Lake stone while I deal with the betrayer." Sarah opened her eyes, lightning flickering in their depths. "We're out of time for careful plans. We improvise, or we lose everything." A rider approached from the valley below, one of Chenway's scouts, his horse lathered with sweat. "The barriers break," he shouted before even reaching them. "Northern mountains, the sky tears open. They come through." Sarah was moving before he finished speaking. She existed partially outside normal space-time now, able to cross vast distances, in heartbeats. But even her speed might not be enough. The forward observation post sat atop Black Mountain, where the Shoshone woman Silver Fox maintained watch. Sarah materialized beside her just as reality split like torn fabric. Through the rift poured things that defied description, not creatures, but conscious hunger given form, entropy incarnate, the devourers in their true horror. "Thunder Dreamer," Silver Fox's voice cracked with fear. "They're too strong." Sarah raised both stones, channeling power that turned the air incandescent. Lightning erupted from her hands, not the blue-white of earthly storms, but something deeper, the fundamental force that separated existence from void. The first wave of devourers struck her barrier and dissolved, but more poured through, an endless tide of cosmic hunger. "Get word to the others," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying harmonics that shook the mountain. "Tell them to converge at the sacred circle. We make our stand there." Silver Fox fled, and Sarah stood alone against the incursion. She fought with powers that warped reality around her. time flowing backward in localized pockets, space folding to trap devourers in infinite loops, fundamental forces weaponized in ways that would have torn a human mind apart. But she wasn't entirely human anymore. The thunder lived in her bones, sang in her blood. She was storm incarnate, standing between two realities. Yet even she had limits. As the rift widened and larger things began pushing through, devourers so vast they dwarfed mountains, Sarah felt her strength wavering. She needed the other stones, the other bearers. Alone, even transformed as she was, she could only delay the inevitable. A hand touched her shoulder. Standing Elk stood beside her, power radiating from him in waves. Not a bearer, but something. Else a lifetime of shamanic training focused into this moment. "I can hold them," he said. "For a time, go, unite the stones. The strain will kill you. Then I die well." His weathered face was serene. "My wife waits for me between worlds. It's time I joined her. Go, Thunder Dreamer, save what can be saved." Sarah wanted to argue, but the mountain shook as something immense tested the barriers. There was no time. She pressed one of her stones into Standing Elk's hands. "Use this. It will give you the strength to hold until you return with the full circle." "Yes." He smiled. "Now go, and Sarah, remember your humanity. In the end, it's not the thunder that will save us, but the human heart that guides it." She left him there, channeling power through the borrowed stone, holding back apocalypse with will alone. Her spirit screamed at abandoning him, but duty drove her onward. The world needed more than noble sacrifices. It needed victory. The other bearers were converging on the sacred circle, a natural amphitheater in the mountains where ley lines crossed. Sarah reached it to find organized chaos. Chen Wei directed evacuees, humans and spirits alike, fleeing the northern incursion. Father Miguel blessed weapons and warriors, preparing for final battle. The Apache elder drew protective circles, trying to create a stronghold. Morning Dove approached, her stone blazing at her throat. The young Apache woman had adapted to the power with surprising speed. Standing Elk, holding the line, buying us time. Sarah's voice was steady, despite the grief clawing at her heart. "Where are the others?" "The monk went to Crater Lake, said the stone there called to his. The others prepared defenses." Sarah nodded. 4 bearers present, one seeking the 6th stone, and the 7th. "I have to go north," she announced. "The first betrayer has the final stone. Without it, the circle remains broken." "You can't face that thing alone," Morning Dove protested. "Let us..." "No, you're needed here. When I return, if I return, we'll need this place held and ready for the unification ritual." Sarah touched the young woman's shoulder. "The thunder chose you for a reason. Trust it. Trust yourself." Before anyone could argue further, Sarah launched herself skyward. Her transformed body could ignore things like gravity when necessary. She flew north, following the spiritual disturbance like a beacon. The hunter army had stopped its advance, forming a vast circle around their leader. As Sarah approached, she saw why. The first betrayer was conducting its own ritual, using the corrupted thunderstone to widen the rifts, to accelerate the devourer's entry into the world. She landed at the circle's edge. Hunters parted before her, creating a path to the center. They knew why she'd come. This had always been inevitable. The confrontation between the original traitor and the Thunder's newest champion. The first betrayer waited at the circle's heart. It had been human once, countless ages ago, but centuries of dark bargains had transformed it into something else. Its form shifted constantly. Now a towering figure of shadow and flame, now a withered corpse, animated by will alone, now something that hurt to perceive directly. "Thunder Dreamer," it spoke with voices like grinding stone. "You come to witness the end of your world?" I come to reclaim what you stole." Sarah stepped forward, power crackling around her. "The seventh stone belongs to the circle." The betrayer laughed, a sound that killed grass and withered trees. "This stone, this corrupted remnant, it serves a new master now, as you will when the devourers claim everything." They fought, not with fists or weapons, but with powers that rewrote the laws of physics. The betrayer wielded entropy itself, decay, dissolution, the inevitable end of all things. Sarah countered with creation's fury, the first thunder that had separated, order from chaos, the lightning that sparked life in primordial seas. Around them, reality warped and buckled, mountains crumbled, the sky bled colors that had no names. Hunters fled as the very ground beneath them shifted between states of matter. Sarah felt herself changing further as she fought, the thunder power threatening to subsume her entirely. She could become pure energy, she realized, shed her flesh, her limitations, her humanity, become something that could match the betrayer. Power for power, but Standing Elk's words echoed, "Remember your humanity." Instead of abandoning her human core, she drew strength from it. Every memory, every loss, every small victory. Thomas's sacrifice, the kindness of strangers, the trust of allies, the weight of responsibility freely chosen. The betrayer pressed, its advantage sensing her moment of introspection. "You hesitate, you cling to weakness." "No," Sarah replied, dodging a blast of pure entropy. "I choose strength." She attacked not with overwhelming force, but with precision. The betrayer was ancient, powerful, but it had forgotten what it meant to be human. That was its weakness. It could no longer understand sacrifice, compassion, the power of connection. Sarah feinted with a lightning strike, then dove inside the betrayer's guard. Her hand closed on the corrupted thunderstone hanging around its neck. The contact burned, not her flesh, but her spirit. The stone's corruption tried to spread to her, to turn her into another servant of entropy. But she had something the betrayer lacked. She had been freely given a stone by Standing Elk, had earned another through compassion for Worthington's victims. The two pure stones resonated with their corrupted sibling, reminding it of its true nature. "Impossible!" The betrayer shrieked as its stone began to pulse with cleansing light. "I bound it with blood and souls. I fed it the death of stars. And I offer it redemption," Sarah said simply. The corrupted stone cracked like an egg, darkness peeling away to reveal thunderlight beneath. The betrayer's form began to unravel. Without its anchor to physical reality, in its final moments, it looked almost human again, lost, confused, afraid. "What have I done?" it whispered with its original voice. "So many eons, so much destruction. For what?" Sarah caught the cleansed stone as the betrayer dissolved into motes of fading light. She could offer no comfort to the ancient traitor, but she could honor its final moment of clarity by using what it had guarded to save everything. Now she had 3 stones. 4 waited at the sacred circle. She needed to move fast. The world lurched. Through her expanded senses, Sarah felt the northern barriers finally shatter completely. Standing Elk's strength had reached its limit. The devourers poured through in numbers beyond counting, a tide of hunger that would consume everything in its path. Sarah ran, not in physical space, but through the spaces between, taking shortcuts through realities that touched their own. She materialized at Black Mountain just as Standing Elk collapsed, the borrowed thunderstone falling from nerveless fingers. She caught him before he hit the ground. His eyes were dimming, but he smiled when he saw her. "Did you?" "Yes. The 7th stone is cleansed. The circle can be completed." "Good, good." His breath rattled. "Tell my wife. Tell her. I never stopped looking. And Sarah? Yes? Remember us. When you become something beyond human, Remember those who stayed mortal for you. He died in her arms as the mountain shook under the assault of cosmic horrors. Sarah closed his eyes gently, then stood. 3 stones at her throat now, their combined power threatening to overwhelm even her transformed nature. But she had work to finish. The Devourers sensed her presence, turned their attention from the broken barriers. Ancient intelligences that had consumed galaxies focused on this small figure blazing with thunderlight. They attacked with forces that could shatter planets. Sarah met them with the fury of storms. She fought a retreating battle, drawing them away from populated areas, leading them toward the sacred circle, where the other bearers waited. Her power carved through Devourers like divine judgment, but for everyone she destroyed, 10 more emerged from the widening rifts. By the time she reached the sacred circle, she was wounded in ways that went beyond the physical. The Devourers' attacks had torn at her spirit, her essence. She blazed with power, but felt herself fragmenting, spreading, too thin across too many realities. The other bearers stood ready. Morning Dove, the monk Bolin, who had successfully retrieved the Crater Lake stone, and 3 others, a Maori warrior woman, a Russian mystic, and an African griot whose stories could reshape reality. 6 stones united for the first time in millennia. The 7th, Sarah gasped, producing the final stone. But as she tried to pass it to Father Miguel, her hand passed through him like smoke. She was losing cohesion, becoming too much spirit, not enough flesh. "You have to anchor yourself!" Chenwei shouted over the roar of approaching Devourers. "Find something human to hold on to!" Sarah tried, but the thunder power pulled at her, urging her to transcend, to become the storm itself. It would be so easy to let go, to become pure force, pure purpose. Then she saw them, not with eyes of flesh, but with deeper sight. Standing, Elk waited at the edge of light, his wife beside him. Thomas was there too, whole and smiling. All the people she'd lost, all those who had died along the way, they stood witness to this moment. "Choose," Singing Waters said, her voice carrying across the veil. Not between human and divine, but how to be both. Sarah understood. The choice wasn't about rejecting one nature or the other. It was about integration, about becoming something new while honoring what came before. She pulled herself back together through sheer will, solidifying enough to place the 7th stone in Father Miguel's hands. "Now," she commanded, "form the circle, channel everything through me." The 7 bearers took their positions, stones blazing. Power flowed between them, creating a mandala of light that pushed back the encroaching darkness. At the center, Sarah stood as the focal point, the lens through which 7 streams of creation force combined. The Devourers pressed forward, reality warping under their hunger. But as the circle's power built, something fundamental shifted. The Thunderstones remembered their purpose, not as weapons, but as guardians of the balance between order and chaos. Sarah felt the pattern completing, the cosmic mechanism clicking into place. She was the key, the bridge, the point where all forces met. Through her, the stones spoke with one voice, issued one command that echoed across all realities. Seal. The rifts began to close, not violently, but with the inevitability of natural law reasserting itself. The Devourers shrieked as they were pulled back into their void realm, the barriers between worlds rebuilding themselves stronger than before. But the power required was immense. Sarah felt herself burning from the inside out, her transformed nature barely able to channel such forces. She was becoming light itself, her consciousness expanding beyond any hope of return to mortal form. "Hold on!" Morning Dove shouted. "Don't let go!" But Sarah knew the truth. The circle needed an anchor, a permanent bridge between realms to maintain the seal. Someone had to stay between worlds, forever watching, forever guarding. She made her choice. Instead of fighting the transformation, she guided it. She became the bridge willingly, consciously, maintaining her sense of self even as her body dissolved into pure energy. She felt herself stretching across dimensions, becoming part of the barrier itself. The last thing she saw with mortal eyes was the circle of bearers, their faces shining with tears and triumph. The devourers were sealed away. The world was saved, but the cost. "Remember me," she whispered, as her form faded into light. Sarah Whitmore died that day, but something new was born, a consciousness woven into the fabric of reality itself, a guardian standing eternal watch between worlds. She was storm and silence, thunder and peace, forever changed but never truly gone. The other bearers felt her presence in every storm, heard her voice in thunder's roll. The Thunderstones continued their work, now guided by her eternal spirit. The world had been saved, but forever changed. And in the spaces between lightning and its flash, between thunder and its echo, Sarah Whitmore kept her vigil. Not as the frightened widow who had stumbled into Bitter Creek, not as the transformed warrior who had fought gods, but as something perfectly balanced between mortal love and divine purpose. The barriers held, the worlds endured, and in every storm that swept across the prairie, people swore they could hear her voice, reminding them that sometimes the greatest strength comes from choosing not what you must become, but who you remain at heart. Standing Elk had been right. In the end, it wasn't the thunder that saved them. It was the human heart that guided it. The 7 stones pulsed with quiet light in their bearers' keeping, their purpose fulfilled, but their vigil eternal. And somewhere, between earth and sky, between mortal and divine, Sarah Whitmore watched over them all, the bridge between worlds, the thunder's human heart, forever. Morning came to a world transformed but whole. The great migration of animals reversed. Creatures returning to their normal ranges. Rivers flowed in their proper channels. The aurora faded to its natural glory, but those who had witnessed the battle knew the truth. They had stood at the edge of annihilation and survived only through sacrifice freely given. The Thunder Dreamer had saved them all by choosing to become something beyond human comprehension, while never forgetting the humanity that made the choice meaningful. In the years that followed, the story spread. Not as legend or myth, but as lived truth. The bearers established sanctuaries at power points around the globe, maintaining the barriers, teaching others to recognize the signs of weakening boundaries. And always, in every storm, Sarah's presence could be felt, watching, guarding, reminding them that the price of their continued existence was eternal vigilance and the willingness to choose sacrifice when the moment demanded it. She had been called cursed. She had been branded as marked by evil. But in the end, Sarah Whitmore had become exactly what the world needed, a bridge between realities, a guardian of the boundaries, and proof that sometimes the greatest power comes from the choice to remain connected to the humanity that others would leave behind. The thunder still dreams, and in those dreams, a woman who was once mortal keeps watch over all the worlds, forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.